Hey, good morning. Welcome to SafeDefend Live. We had a horrible incident happen yesterday in the United States that we're going to talk about techniques that you should use if you're in an open space, in a public space, and something like this happens. What are good practices? What are the best things you can do to ensure as many people don't get injured as you possibly can? Today, I'm with the great Doc Vecchi, who is an expert on all things path to violence and active killer. And we're going to talk about his experiences, what he knows, and some things we need to think about in these situations to keep people alive and to ensure we minimize harm when something bad happens. Doc, it's great to see you.
It's good to see you, Dave. Thanks so much. And it's so sad, to have this as the topic, especially after such a horrible event. But it just seems like every time you turn around, there's something else going on. We talked you talk about, and you said you brought up open spaces and things like this. And when you look at these attacks, and you break them down to locations, right? Open space is actually number one. And open space meaning you're not at home, you're not in a really contained area that you have control over, like a church, your workplace, your school, your classroom, things like this. Open space is kind of like what we saw in this case in Maine, right, where you've got a bar and it's open to the public. You got people coming in and out. The patrons don't really have control over the space other than where they're taking up space or sitting and things like this. And we go back to this whole run, hide, fight thing. And I think it's good and it's bad at the same time. And the reason I say that is because when you say run, hide, fight, a lot of times people look at that and they think, well, it's somehow linear, like somehow, you run and then you hide and then you fight. And then there's misunderstandings. Well, what does run mean? Okay, well, run is, a better term in my opinion, for this is escaping. You're putting space between you and the threat or the danger. And first and foremost, the reason for this is because your number one job is to keep yourself safe and other people that you can reasonably keep safe, by, let's say, like in this case, it was one was at a bowling alley and they had a lot of children. It was like a youth bowling event, and grab some kids and run with you, and run outside. So it goes back to, what do you do to escape in these areas? Well, one of the things that is problematic in open spaces is you're not as familiar with the space, right? If you go to a restaurant, you go to maybe once a year, or you've never been to, you don't really know what's going on as far as where are the exits, which ones are locked, where are they located, what's outside and things like this. And so that makes it kind of hard, but it also requires you to be a little bit more situationally aware, at least when you're walking into a place you're not used to. That's kind of strange, right? So and you can, simple things, right? You can get in your car and drive around the building, right? ID, where the exits are. Where are you going to park your car in the most easiest place to get to if you have to run and get in a car, or where are you going to run to take cover because you may not be able to get to your car. You want to run out of that building and go directly to somewhere where you can, hide and be protected from bullets. Is there fences that are going to keep you from going out, things like this, right? So it's really no different. We've had all these discussions on the school, a lot of stuff on schools with teachers and administrators, and also in the workplace, right? Same kind of thing. Know your exits, know your alternate exits in case you can't go out the exit that you prefer, right? And more importantly, once you get out, know where you're going. Don't stop, don't group, and don't help injured people on the way out. And I know that is a hard thing, especially if it's someone that you know or love. But the problem is if you stay with them to try to help them, not only are they likely to get killed, but so are you and anyone else that is following you that you're trying to help. And so that's a tough dilemma, and especially we see this a lot in schools with the teachers because their students are just like their kids, right? So, instead of, talking run, escape, I think, is important. And here's the other thing for escaping, especially in this situation. Very few people, if anybody, was armed that we knew of. And so the idea here is to make space, get space between you and the threat, and then move off the line of fire. Most of these guys, from their perspective, what we know about these offenders is they have a film. They're in a film that in their head they're playing out this story, right? They've got the gun. They are the predator. Everyone's the prey. Their mindset is that they've got the gun, no one else has the gun, and that they're going to win. Okay, and that is something that actually is to our advantage, because he does not, and almost always never expects tactics, never expects moving off the line. They just expect people to cower and be shot, right? And so if you walk through this, you visualize it, you have a plan, you're just a little situationally aware. And I don't mean to be like paranoid, right? But just simple things like noting where the exits are, noting where it leads to, looking for suspicious, things, right? If someone would walk in with a rifle, someone walks in with protective armor, someone is touching themselves, and I don't mean in a bad way, but I mean touching for guns. People who carry concealed have a tendency to check their weapon. So looking for weird or out of normal or out of place behaviors. And again, here's the other thing, especially for escaping. Number one is don't hesitate. If you think that it's unusual, it might be a gunshot, react. This very situation happened. We had people that they weren't quite sure. Was it a balloon that popped? Was it, a Halloween prank? Was it firecrackers? The thing is that there's no time to react reasonably. And so if you hear that, you sense it, here's the deal. The thing is with the human body is that go back to caveman days where we are hardwired for threats. Back when we used to be on the menu, right? And then we'd have to deal with, threats. Well, that's hardwired in our brain. And when you feel threatened, death or serious bodily injury, your body is going to tell you before you even consciously know it. Pay attention to that. Follow your instincts, follow your feelings on that. Because here's the deal: if you're wrong, who cares, right? But if you're not and you hesitate, that could be it. And so, I focus a lot on the escape piece because people just think, well, I'm just going to run. Well, you got to kind of have a place to go. The second place is that sometimes we can't run, right? We can't escape. Maybe there's only one exit and the shooter's there, or the door's locked, or whatever. You got to have a secondary place to go to try to run for cover and to barricade, primarily in a room. All right. No different than someone, teacher in a classroom that hears, gunfire or some sort of threat, and she decides that, running isn't an option because of the situation. She's going to close her door. She's going to lock it. She's going to barricade. She's going to move away. She's going to turn the lights off. She's going to silence her cell phones, and she's going to be watching over everybody. And very same scenario is identify a place to go, preferably a door, a room with one door, no windows, that could be locked on the inside. That is probably your number one best thing to do. Now, if you're in your house, or you're in your church, or you're in your workplace, or you're in your school, that's easy. You can pre-stage all this stuff ahead of time because you know your environment. In these type of situations, it's a little bit harder because you don't really know where the rooms are. But some things to keep in mind: bathrooms typically don't have windows. You may not be able to lock the door on a bathroom, but that might be a place to go. Offices, kitchen areas, and then of course, as you're moving, you might say, "Oh, I didn't see that door." So now, boom, I change my thought process, and now I'm back to escape, which is always the better thing. And so, getting out of this linear thinking of run, hide, and then fight. I might run, or I might fight, or I might lock down or evade and then fight, or I might lock down and then run. I'm constantly looking for opportunities to get away from that, right? And so that's the evasion piece that people don't think about. A little bit more difficult in open spaces and areas you don't have control over. And the last one is the one that really bothers me the worst.
Yeah.
Is this idea of fighting the bad guy. Okay. First and foremost, in our training, and you know this as well as I do, when you have to engage the offender, it's not in an offensive attack type, pick the initiative thing, unless it's defensive, unless you get cornered. Okay. I think you had mentioned earlier, we were talking earlier about the rattlesnake, right?
Yep.
You run into a rattlesnake and you get cornered. You can't run from the rattlesnake. What are you going to do? You're going to do your best to step on its head, right? And you may still get bit, right? But you have to do that. Why would you try to step on the rattlesnake's head if you could escape, right? And so this idea, it's defensive engagement of the offender, not an offensive. So in cases like this, we're talking about ambush. So okay, you get pinned, you get cornered, you get jumped, you turn a corner and he's there. Okay, you might have to fight, no problem, right? And then there's things that you can learn, right, which you should, to make that be more successful. The other one, which happens more often, is you happen to duck into a room, and maybe the door doesn't lock, and he starts to work his way in, and then you're now looking around thresholds, around the door, or around maybe a window that he breaks to try to get in. Any appendage that goes in there, you see the gun, you see the hand, you see the other hand, you see his head. Those are the things that you attack, and you attack with ferocity, and you don't stop until he is subdued. And one of the things to practice or keep in mind is that try to make it a team sport. Don't just make it about you. If you are in there with 4 or 5 able people, and just in case he comes in, everybody needs a job. I'll take the gun, you take his right hand, his left hand, you take his right leg, you take his head, you focus on gouging his eyes out, and you focus on crushing his testicles. I mean, you can actually be, and that's what you're doing. The only thing I would say on this is as far as just keeping in mind is that once the person is subdued, you can't continue to gouge his eyes out and stab him, because then it starts to shift from a defensive situation to possible crime. We don't want to do that. So at least have that thought process that when he's under control, hold him down. If he continues to fight, continue to fight. The standard here on all of this stuff, as far as deadly force, is simply this, and it's no different than if you had a concealed weapon permit and you go to the course. It's the same standard that the police have to meet. If you fear, and you can reasonably fear, that you are in fear of death or serious bodily injury, and under the law, you have the green light to use deadly force, whatever that might be. It may be a gun, might be a knife, might be your hands, it might be a baseball bat, whatever it is, right? Coffee cup. But once it's no longer reasonable to believe you are in fear of death or serious bodily injury, you have to back off. It doesn't mean you got to let the guy go. You just stop applying the deadly force, and then adjust it as necessary, because who knows, he might try again, and he might have a hidden weapon, or there's a lot of, we can go, what ifs forever on this. But those are just some things that I think is important, because what we want to be very clear on this engagement piece on the offender is that no one ever expects someone other than law enforcement to actually engage the threat as their primary duty or their primary activity. What we do is, number one, keep ourselves safe. Rather, that means escape, evade, okay? Only engage if you don't have a choice, and engage at the force necessary to keep yourself and others safe. Other than that, that is really should be the focus, because we go back to that time gap that we always talk about here at SafeDefend, right? That critical time gap, right? That's your survival from the time it starts until the time it ends. This is the area that you have to work to survive, not only survive in, but thrive in. And frankly, the approach that we've taken at SafeDefend, I believe, is cutting edge. I think it's some of the best training out there, because we focus on two things. Number one, does it make sense in how, with regards to how the offender behaves? So offender behaviors, it makes sense as far as that. And number two, is it going to work when you're in a body alarm response? When you are in that freeze, flight, or fight situation, when you can't think, all you can do is do what you're trained to do, which is a conditional or auto response type reflex, and that is only be done through training and practice. And the last thing I guess I would say on this is that really the only difference between a patron coming into a bar and that police officer, in terms of their ability to deal with the situation, is the police officer has more training than that patron. So it's a matter of getting the training and getting the right training and making decisions as you see fit based on what's going on in front of you right now.
Well, I think I want to kind of summarize what you said for everybody, and from my viewpoint, and it's really simple. First and foremost, 99% of the people in the country are not trained to use deadly force. Period. So let's start with the engage piece first, because I think it's important for people to understand this. You should only engage a assailant, a person that's using something to hurt and harm people with deadly consequences, as a last resort. And I always talk about, if you corner a snake, it's going to bite. If you leave the snake alone, it's probably going to leave you alone. Maybe not the state with an active killer, but you do not want to fight unless it's an absolute last resort. That is at the point you have nothing else you can do. Don't run towards the gunman. Don't get out of the way. The second thing is escape and evade. They are not linear, like you said. You can escape and or evade at the same time, right? Depending on the scenario, and it adjusts. The final thing I want to bring in here is situational awareness. And what I mean by that, I guess for being in the military as long as I was and being overseas as much as I was, I always find myself even today not sitting with my back to the door, not sitting with my back to an open window, paying attention to what's going on around me. Is there anything that's odd or peculiar? I'm always kind of just aware of my surroundings. What I would say to everybody else that hasn't had any of that training is this: be aware of what's going on around you and know where the exits are in the building. It's not that you're paranoid. Say, I know where I am. I know where I'm going. It's all good. I know most people don't do this, but I do. When I get on an airplane, I count every seat to the nearest exit. How many seats are there? Because when an airplane fills up with smoke, you don't know where you're going and you can't see. Think about in the building, where am I going to go if something bad happens? And be aware, we have more and more people making bad decisions in our country and doing horrific things that are unimaginable. The best thing we can do to prepare ourselves is to know where we are, know where we're going, and have a plan if something happens, which includes first and foremost escape and evade. Is that fair?
Couldn't say it better myself, brother.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, this is what I love about SafeDefend. We look at from the beginning to the end and how to react as a responsible person that doesn't have hundreds and thousands of hours of training. We just want you to stay alive. We care about you and your family, and we want the best for you. So keep tuning into us, watching what we're doing. We're going to give lots of good tips. Doc Becky's very, very smart on this area and has a ton of experience. So take his advice. He's a smart man, and we're lucky to have him. So, Doc, with that, Dave and Doc, we are out of here.
We are. Thank you so much.